or heaven and hell? Anybody have a preference? Okay. We'll just run through all of them.
Heaven and hell.
Heaven and hell?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's just start with that then. If we have time, we'll do reincarnation. All right. So heaven and hell, it is. Okay. So I took part in a panel, like in a conference, like a seminar with rabbis and priests. And I told the story once in shul or twice, but they asked all the rabbis and priests in training, to sit in the middle of the room, and the other religion can ask you questions. So we had a rabbi from our groups in the middle of the circle, and there were Christian, like these priests in training all around him, and they asked him, what does Judaism have to say about heaven and hell? And he said, nothing. We have nothing to say about it. Judaism only focuses on this world. And I stepped in after him, and I filled in a lot of the material that was here, because Judaism does have a lot to say about heaven and hell. Do we know it's for sure what's going to happen? It's another story, but there's a lot written on it, and some of it's interesting. Some of it can point us to the right direction in life. So I figure there's like a nice text in here that can help us focus on like what we need to focus on in this world in order to get to the next world. So we'll learn these texts together. Again, I can't tell you for sure what's going to happen until we get there, and hopefully we'll only be in heaven, so we won't know about the other one. Okay, so here we go. I'm on page, and if you have the source sheet printed out, page 6, but you can just follow with me. So it says here, heaven and hell. Let me see. The afterlife, this is actually good too, actually. Go back. The afterlife in Jewish tradition, this is page 4. So there is discussion of afterlife in traditional texts. Here is one place where it talks about something that happens afterwards. We don't know exactly what that is. It says like this, source 9. It says, Avram expired and died at a good age, mature and content, and he was gathered to his people. What does that mean to be gathered to your people? It's not so clear. Does it mean that you have your people, your peeps are waiting for you in heaven and you're gathered to them? Does it mean you're gathered to the underworld community? It's not so clear, but it talks about gathering to your people in different places in Bereshit 25 and 35. So that's the biblical sense. There's a discussion being gathered to your people. Another place it talks about the afterlife is in Bamidbar, which is source 10, and it talks about the Korach situation where they got sucked in. The ground swallowed them up. And where did they go? They went down alive into Sheol. This word Sheol, it's a title for the underworld, and perhaps like a type of hell or some place afterlife. And so the Bible seems to believe in a place called Sheol. Exactly what does that mean? It's not so clear. King David talks about Sheol also. So it's not so clear from the Bible exactly if there's a clear belief in the afterlife the way we understand it. We have to name that. Okay, I think you have to be true to the text. It's not so clear. Where it starts to pick up is more in the later books of the Bible, which is the Tanakh, which is Nevi'im and Ketuvim. So this is the text that's always brought. These are two texts. Shmuel is source 11. Source 11, it says Shmuel died, and King Saul raised Samuel's body from the dead, or raised his soul from the dead. And so that's this source. He came to a woman who knew how to do these things. And it says, and the woman said, whom shall I rise from the dead for you? And King Saul said, raise up Shmuel for me. And the woman said to Shaul, I saw a great man ascending from the earth. What does he look like? An elderly man is ascending. He's garbed in a cloak. Shaul realized it was Shmuel. He bowed down with his face to the ground, prostrated himself, and Shmuel said to Shaul, why did you disturb me to raise me up? So you could say this was like in a vision, but it seems like from the simple reading of the Tanakh, from the book of Shmuel, there is a belief in souls that can discuss things with us in this world and or have an interface with us in this world. So that's a simple reading of that text. And then you have Daniel texts which also talk about the afterlife. And these are the classic texts that are brought. But this is a much later text, like from Babylon, like Babylonian exile. So that's like much later, after the destruction of the temple. So historians say, like Neil Gaiman wrote a book, The Death of Death. He's like a theologian. He passed away recently from JTS. And he said that he accepted the academics' belief that these beliefs in the afterlife kind of developed in later generations as Jews became exposed to Zoroastrian philosophies on the afterlife. And so the way we conceive of afterlife today is different, perhaps, than maybe conceived of it in biblical times, according to that philosophy. So source 12, though, has a clearer discussion of something that happens afterwards, and says, at that time, Michael, I'm in source 12, Michael, the great prince who stands over the children of your people, will be silent. It will be a time of distress that never since a nation existed until that time. At that time, your people will escape. Everyone who's found is inscribed in the book, and many who sleep in the dust of the earth will awaken. Okay, so that's something. It's saying there's going to be an awakening for those who sleep in the dust. These for eternal life, and those for disgrace, for eternal abhorrence. And the wise will shine like the brightness of the sky, and those who bring the multitudes to righteousness like the stars forever and ever. Okay, and then you have Kohelet, which is also a book in the later books of the Bible. After death, the soul returns to God, and the dust returns to earth as it was, and the spirit returns to God who gave it. So there's also something. The spirit returns to God. So there is something. There is an existence for the spirit after the body dies, perishes. And then Pirkei Avot, which is like a later text, it's Mishnaic text, talks about this world as a banquet hall. It says, this world is like a lobby before the world to come. Prepare yourself in the lobby so you enter the banquet hall. The next world is like the banquet hall. So you see this world and the next world. So it's kind of like if you read these texts historically, basically as we go on in time, a belief in the afterworld keeps developing to the point that in Mishnaic text, in this source 14, they can start to say that it's like a banquet hall, and this world's like the lobby. Prepare yourself in the lobby for the banquet hall. So you see a belief in these things in Jewish texts. So that's kind of like just this text, this stage introducing this material to you. So it's kind of like unmute to see if anybody has any questions. And then we'll move on to like what heaven and hell are how they're depicted in Jewish texts. So everyone's unmuted if you want to share anything.
No, good, thank you.
Okay, cool. All right, so we'll go back. All right, so we have here the next stage, which is heaven and hell. Okay, so what happens in heaven and hell? I once heard, I think I shared this in shul once too, but I once heard there's a text in the Talmud, in Masechet Brachot, which says, what's heaven like? It's the tzaddikim, all the holy people. They sit, and their crowns are in their head, and they study Gemara. They study Talmud all day. And a rabbi once said that his students said to him, Rabbi, that's not heaven, that's hell. You have to study Talmud all day. Anyway, I would like to do that. But that's one depiction of what heaven is like. But here are like this is a mystical text which describes it a little bit more. This is source 15. Ramchal was an important mystic in our tradition. If you want to have a clear explanation of all these things, I have his book here. This is a good book, The Way of God, Derech Hashem. It's very clear. It goes stage by stage. It's very organized. I highly suggest it. It has a lot of material on this topic and on a lot of other things. So it's a great book to read, and the translation is very easy to read too. So it's called The Way of God. You can get it on Amazon. All right, so Ramchal discusses Gehenna. Gehenna is hell, not as some sort of like expression of divine wrath upon the individual. We don't believe in Judaism, for the most part, in eternal damnation. Okay, that's not so much of a Jewish thing. He says in this text, in his book, there are individuals that can completely remove their spirituality, become devoid of spirituality, to the point that that they've cause themselves eternal damnation. But that's like for very, very evil people. For the most part, hell in Judaism is an intermediary stage. And the Arizal, who is an important Jewish mystic, he said that he talks about in the language of someone merited to go to hell. So if you tell someone to go to hell, that's not really a bad thing. Can I get a virtual laugh for that? Okay. So, but the idea, why would it be not so bad to go to hell? Because it's a purgatory. It can cleanse you and elevate you to the next level. No one said it's fun. Okay, we don't suggest to go there. No one wants to go visit there. But it does act as a spiritual cleansing. That's this test, source 15, where he says, Gehenna is a spiritual cleansing process to ensure the maximum attendance in the world to come. So if you want to get to the world to come, you can't just come there in sullied clothing. You have to clean. You have to put all your clothing through the ringer. You have to you have to bathe yourself. You have to perhaps, if you're very soiled or dirty, you have to maybe scrub yourself very hard. I'm depicting it in a very gentle way. But the idea is that you have to cleanse yourself before you go to the next level. In his kindness, God maximized man's chances of successfully attaining his ultimate goal. He therefore decreed that there should be a secondary way to attach oneself to God for those for whom such attachment is fitting, namely those who are overcome by evil, but not to such an extent that they should lose existence entirely. Now, people ask, are there different levels in the next world? We're going to talk about that in a moment, but if someone goes to a Washington Wizards game, there are all kinds of tickets you can have. You can have boxy tickets, and you can have the tickets very high in the bleachers. But ideally, you want to have the best tickets that you can get. And the way you can do that in this world is to live a life of Torah mitzvot. But on another level, if you live a life of authenticity, that you are true to yourself, your true path in life, which is kind of hard to find, but you're true to yourself, you're authentic, and you're trying your best to grow in spirituality and do the best you can, that is definitely a way to achieve these levels in the next world. So it's not something that's like very far from us in the sense that like if you do 1, 2, 3 and then God's going to give you this and that reward. A lot of it is based on where we are in this world. If we've lived an authentic and strong spiritual life, when we get to the next world, we'll already be at that place. It'll be fitting for us in the spiritual world to just be elevated higher and higher because we are already in that place. So hell and heaven don't necessarily mean, they're not disconnected from this world. They could be an extension of where we are in this world. So these people therefore experience the punishment of Gehenna, the purpose of which is to recompense the person according to his transgression, in the way that will be left with no debt to pay for his misdeeds. So we want to cleanse you so you don't have any debt for your misdeeds. He will then be able to achieve his ultimate reward in accordance with the good acts he performed. By virtue of this system, the actual number of those who are lost completely is minimized. Such a severe consequence only applies to those who so completely been taken over by evil that it will be impossible for them to experience a true reward, eternal delight. Somebody who's completely removed their spirituality from themselves, it's not fitting for them in the next world. So they've completely dimmed their spirituality. This is for unique individuals who have completely disconnected. But for the most part, people go through this intermediary stage of Gehenna and they're cleansed. The question is, how long does it last? So that's a Mishnah in Eduyot, part 16, which talks about 12 months. Hopefully it won't be 12 months for any of us, okay? We don't believe any of us deserve 12 months in this purgatory and this cleansing process. Therefore, in that strong belief, we don't say Kaddish for 12 months. We say it for 11 months. If we were to say it for 12 months, it would be admitting that we believe that our loved one deserves a 12-month punishment. We don't believe that. Therefore, we do Kaddish for less than 12 months, and we believe that we'll be able to get through that cleansing period in a shorter time than needed. So that's this text. We're not going to look into it. These are all kinds of things that lasted for 12 months. So the judgment of the wicked and Gehenna is 12 months. So this is an important text, okay? Now you ask yourself, what happens when I get there? When I get to the next world? I mean, there's like all these movies. I don't know, like anybody, you can't answer me, but perhaps you've seen Bruce Almighty. Anybody? I don't know. I can't even see you, but let me see if I can see people. Okay, I can't really see anybody. So there's a movie, Bruce Almighty, and he goes to heaven and he meets Morgan Freeman there. Okay, so that might happen. I don't know. Morgan Freeman has a very relaxing voice and he sounds kind of like godly. So who knows? But most likely that's not going to happen. But here is something that that the Talmud says happens when you get there. Okay, so you get to the next world. What happens there in the judgment stage? So they ask you questions. Ask you questions. Did you can here are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5 or 6 questions. So the questions like this: did you conduct business faithfully? Did you designate time for Torah study? Did you engage in procreation? Did you await salvation? Did you engage in the dialects of wisdom or understand one matter from another? So this, if someone wants to know, like what we should be focusing on in this world to get to the next world, or word it differently, what are some ways that we can grow spiritually, like the main ways that are important for us to grow spiritually? These, the Mishnah gives us a list. The Talmud gives us a list. And it's interesting, if you look, pay attention to this, and this is the list you're going to be asked. You're going to be asked. I'm not sure you're going to get there. You're going to be, oh, Orit and Ben, or Steve. I don't know if they're going to be calling out to you in a scary way, but this is basically saying, like, this is what you got to focus on, because this is what you're going to be required to be answer to yourself or to God in the next world. So it's interesting if you pay attention to the order. It talks about if you were in yeshiva, you would have thought in yeshiva, like, just if you didn't have this text, you would think, of course they're going to ask you about learning Torah first, but they don't. They ask you about conducting business faithfully. That's the first thing. The question is, why is that? There's different discussion around that, but it's just interesting that they ask that first. Perhaps that's might even be harder. I don't know. Anyone have any thoughts on that? One second. You can unmute yourself, actually, if anybody has any thoughts on that. All right. Okay, so, but what's interesting also is this idea of, did you await salvation? So that's not a simple thing to do. Like, did we really await better times? I think that's powerful. I think it's really powerful, actually. Like, were we a positive person? Like, did we hope that there's going to be better times? That's important for spiritual growth, to have your focus on, like, procreation, etc., but to await salvation, to await better times, perhaps even to do what we can to bring the salvation. So those are things that we're asked in the next world. And I mean, if we're already tying to Corona, that's something actually for sure to think about. Staying positive, looking for proactive things that we can do in these situations. It's funny, like the outside world seems like it's like closing in, and all we're left with is our house, like our inner world and our close circle. And who knows why all this is happening, but definitely there's like our mission at this point, I think, is to twist it and use it for, and like to flip it and use it for a positive. And I think that's the idea of like awaiting salvation, like actively moving forward to make things better in this world. So that's what they're going to ask you in the judgment, and I think that's what Hashem is demanding from us now. Okay, I did the Corona Dvar Torah. All right, so we're continuing. So what happens in heaven? Okay, so that's what happens in the judgment. What happens in heaven? So this is also an important piece. The Ramchal talks about the body must die. Okay, so I'm in this paragraph here. The body returns to its element. The body returns to the earth, and it undergoes decay and decomposition for an appropriate amount of time. And it says during this intermediate time, now where's the soul at this point? We saw the soul does exist afterwards, at least according to the Mishnah. The soul needs a place to rest. It's for this reason that the God prepared a soul world. When a soul leaves its body, it enters the soul world, remains there in a state of rest while the body undergoes what it must. During this period, the soul experiences sublime delight. Okay, the soul goes to the soul world. So when you are praying for your loved one, you're saying Kaddish, or the rabbis at the funeral saying Kel Maleh, or during the Shiva, etc. We are believing that the soul is in a soul world. and it's experiencing a form of sublime delight. But it's also important, the next, we're going to see later on, at that point, the soul's very confused too. The soul's like in this place where it's like we're so used to being in the body, according to these texts, that it's kind of confused. And the soul world is so new to it, it's not used to being in that bright light. And so the soul's very confused. That's why we even sit Shiva. Some people say it's to sit Shiva, not just to bring comfort to the mourners, but to the soul who's lingering around. So that's also something to think about. So the soul goes to the soul world, and when the soul leaves the body and enters the soul world, it can then radiate freely with a brightness through both this and what it can attain in the soul world. The soul is able to regain the power that it lost associated with the body. Okay, so that's a little bit what happens to the soul in the next world. And again, we said that like it's connected to like what you do in this world. That's where you'll be in the next world. Basically, like if you're spiritual in this world, your spirit, the individual spiritual, or they're living authentic spiritual life in this world, when they get to the next world, they'll feel comfortable. It's like somebody who, let's say an individual is living a very dark, like selfish life in this world. So when they get to the next world, and it's like a world of light and bright light and energy, when they get there, they'll feel very out of place and uncomfortable. And that's like what like that student was saying. Like if he gets to the next world and he has to learn Talmud all day, he'll feel like it's Gehenom. We want to prepare ourselves so we'll be fitting in a place that will fit with us when we get to the next world. So that's kind of like another way to understand the reward in the next world. If you're in a place in this world, you'll feel more comfortable in the next world. And if not, that might be the suffering of Gehenom, that you don't feel like that's your place. You feel out of place, uncomfortable, and not fitting with that spiritual reality. That's a little bit connected to that. So here's between this world and the next, part 4. It says the soul is in mourning during Shiva. We talked about this, but this is actually straight from the Talmud. Rav Chisda said a person's soul mourns for himself during all 7 days of mourning following his death. And he mourned for his father 7 days. So this text seems to say that the soul mourns for itself during Shiva. Again, that could be connected to the fact that the soul is like in a state of discomfort and is very used to being in the body. So it's like in disarray, actually. That's also another reason why we say you should not, Judaism is against autopsies, aside from if it's going to be for some sort of medical purpose or whatever, that's going to save lives. But it's because you don't want to tamper with the body. You don't want to tamper with the body because the soul is kind of mourning over the body. That's like a belief, actually. And that's another reason why we're so quick to bury the body, because we don't want to cause discomfort for the soul, according to mystical texts. So, of course, there's a lot of other reasons for sure, but those are some explanations based on this direction in this text. So, this is also interesting. This text in the Talmud says, everything people say before the deceased, he knows, or she knows, until the tomb is sealed with the top stone. Rabbi Chia and Rabbi Shimon, son of Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, disagree with regard to the meaning of the statement. One of them said that the deceased is aware until the tomb is sealed with the top stone, which is referring to the covering of the grave. One of them said it is until the flesh decomposes. So according to this, at least, the soul knows what's happening. We saw in Shmuel, the soul can even know later on. Shaul brought Shmuel down. So here's another text, source 21. Certain things are a taste of the world to come. There are 3 things which are a taste of the world to come. One of them is Shabbat. Okay, so that's also a special thing where there's like an interface. There's almost like a bleeding over of the next world into this world, or like almost like a bridge. It might be just the 60th, a taste of the world to come. But on Shabbat, you have that connection, that energy, and you have the ability to tap in to some extent to the next world. I don't know if you've ever felt that, but I've been at Shalosh Sudas, maybe not, sometimes at our shul, not all the time, but I've been in yeshiva. When I was in yeshiva during Shalosh Sudas, during the third meal, we would sing together very passionately. And I had times when I felt like I was just being elevated to another sphere. And for me, I felt that was like a little bit of a taste of the next world, like that my soul was like just experiencing what it might feel to be like in that spiritual bliss. So again, this is like, maybe that's a little bit of taste of the next world. They also say that Shabbat's a taste of the next world because in Shabbat you're not working. So, you're not working in the next world either. Maybe some of us aren't working now either. Do you feel like you're in the Olam Haba right now? All right. So I'm just going to unmute it for a little bit, and then we'll see if we want to do the next piece, which is reincarnation. All right, I'm unmuting it. Anybody have any reflections on anything here?
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, Kim?
I sent it to you during the chat, and it's about organ donation. Something you said made me think about it.
Yeah.
The work that I do with medical students, there are cases that we present where there's a need for an organ donation. And so it's to train...
No, I'm just going to finish this and then I'll turn the light off.
I'm just going to mute.
It's to train those going into that field how you manage a family in that moment of, are they going to donate or not? And the question always comes up, do Jews allow organ donation? Because when I was growing up, it was a definite no. But now they tell me, oh, no, 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 the rabbis have changed their mind and it's okay for Jews to donate organs.
So you're talking about live from a cadaver or from a live person?
From a person who's going to pass, and can they use the organ for saving another life or for, some, medical reason. But mostly it's, oh, we're so sorry about your daughter's condition, but now we need to talk to you about, would you like to donate her organs to somebody who needs this or that or the other thing? Yeah.
So for a while, there is this belief that people want to have their bodies intact for the resurrection of the dead, but that's most of the rabbis I saw, that's not really the reason why they would be against organ donation. It more goes back to how you define death. We had a class on this one Shabbos where on organ donation, where it's like, how you define death? Do we go by a cardiac death or brain death? If you go by brain death, which is some rabbis are starting to adopt this now, some in YU, and some also in my seminary, which is more of a progressive seminary. If you accept the moment of death as brain death, that gives you more opportunities to donate organs because it's easier to they're more usable. You have more time also. So it goes back to that. Those who don't believe that the moment of death is brain death, and they believe it goes by the heart, a person could be brain dead. And for them, if you remove a vital organ, you're killing the person. So that's what it goes back to. Okay. So for a long time, it was believed that cardiac death is the path, is the accepted approach in a lot of circles. But now that scientific research is coming out, and it's more widely accepted that brain death is the moment of death, it seems like rabbis are shifting a little bit on that, and not to the right, but more to the left. Rabbis are more on the left. So that's kind of what it's dependent upon. Is that helpful?
Yeah, I've always been curious, so thank you.
Yeah. I'm just going to mute other people.
And if you get time to talk about reincarnation, do we believe in that?
Okay. So let me just unmute everybody and just see if anybody else wants to say anything.
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
I have trouble with the idea that Jake Exler.
Okay, so I can only see you.
Oh, hi.
Okay, go. I'm with you.
The idea that a soul can look down, so to speak, and at a simcha of someone in the family, and they'll be happy, they'll kvel or whatever. And my problem with that is, what if they're looking down and there's a relative who has a debilitating disease, a degenerative disease? What is the soul feeling under those circumstances? Or does the soul not look down at all on what's going on here?
Yeah. Well, the question is, if the soul knows what's going on, does that mean that the soul feels things like we feel things? I don't know. Based on the text that I've read, again, I don't know. I've never been in that world, so I don't know. But according to the text that I've read, there's a certain, when the soul connects to the spiritual, to the afterlife, it connects to God's infinite knowledge. So I would sense that they would be elevated to a place of understanding things on a deeper level than we see them.
Mm-hmm.
That's helpful. Like, so I would sense that like they might not be reacting the same way that we react.
Okay. They have a broader view of what's going on in the world.
Yeah, but according to like the text that I saw, it takes them a while to get to that point. Like when you start out, that's like the 12 months of judgment, where it's like you're not used to that world of infinite knowledge. That's like the divine world. You're used to like the finite world and those modes of thinking. So like detaching yourself from those modes of thinking, becoming more accustomed to those more broader approaches and seeing things from a divine perspective. That can be like that can be Gehenna. That can be Gehenna.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, okay. Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. Anyone else have any? Okay. So let's do the next part, reincarnation. Do Jews believe in reincarnation? I'm going back to the beginning of the source sheet. Make this smaller. Okay. So take a look at this. These are Maimonides' 13 principles. Can you see them? For those who can see, can you read them? See if you find reincarnation here. I'm going to spare you the search. You're not going to find it. Okay? Reincarnation is not a principle of Jewish faith. If you believe in it, good. If you don't, fine. Meaning like it's not one of our principles. If the discussions on the afterlife in Maimonides' 13 principles of faith, which are kind of like broadly accepted principles, limits itself to the Messiah, the resurrection of the dead.
That's what I want to ask you, Rabbi.
You saying something, Orit, or?
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about the Messiah. How is it going to work with the resurrection?
So I can't hear you that well, though. It's a little bit low.
If the soul changed from one lifetime to another, then which soul will be resurrected? The most recent, or because we live in different lives. So.
You're saying if you believe in reincarnation and your soul inhabited multiple bodies, which body is going to be reincarnated?
Yeah, which one will be reincarnated?
Yeah, I remember seeing that question asked. I don't remember the answer to that. It's a good question, though. Let's say this, like, let's say in the first, you were married to somebody in your first reincarnation, and then the next reincarnation you're married to somebody else. Who are you going to live with forever?
Right.
Hopefully it'll be the better marriage.
I get to choose.
Unless you go to hell. I was just joking. No, but that's a good question. But that's connected more to like the resurrection of the dead, which is actually a topic within itself. Like I have a whole class on what happens in end of days. This class is what happens in the afterlife. The difference is afterlife is after one dies. The end of days is what happens in this world. The messianic days, the temple, the resurrection of the dead, that kind of stuff all happens in this world. So our class, we're going to go till 7:45. So we're going to try to fit everything in here. So if you want, if that's a question you wanted to explore, we can do a whole class on that. I have a whole source sheet on that. It's interesting. So in the meanwhile, if you look at this source sheet, these principles of faith, you don't see any discussion of resurrection here. And it gets to the point that Rav Saadia Gaon, who's considered one of our authorities, in the 9th century said, I don't believe in reincarnation. Anybody who believes in it is speaking nonsense. Okay? So I'm not going to go through all of his arguments here. But let me see actually how much material we have here. Okay, so we can actually go through some of his arguments. See what he says. Okay. So here it is. Rav Saadia Gaon refutes it, and he says, They take it for granted that the body of a man is capable of transforming the essence of the soul. Okay, so actually, I'm not going to. That's like a little too heavy. They say the Creator is just. It is inconceivable that he should occasion suffering to little children, lest it be for sins committed by their souls during their time when they were lodged in their former bodies. This view is, however, subject to numerous refutations. Okay, so I'm just bringing this argument up because this is a classic argument this is a classic usage of the reincarnation theory in religious circles. When something goes wrong that we don't understand, when innocent people are dying, like today, innocent people are dying from this virus and from all kinds of things, all the time. Babies are dying, God forbid. How do you explain that? How do you explain the justice behind all that? So one way is that I've heard rabbis explain without flinching in their classes is that perhaps that individual lived a life earlier and they only had one thing to correct. Or maybe they had one thing they had to be punished for, and then they'd be completely elevated to the highest levels of Gan Eden. They had to come back to this world, suffer a little bit, and then go up. That soul was able to elevate to the higher levels. Now, some people, this brings them comfort. Other people, it bothers them. So because this isn't a tenet of Jewish faith, you can go either way with it. His argument was that when he refutes the third argument, he brings a few arguments here, he refutes them. But he says that God has plans. I think he says that God has bigger plans that we know, and it could be that we don't always know why God's doing it. I think that's what he says. I'm forgetting. Anyway. But that's usually the argument that's brought for reincarnation. Now, there's texts that he's a rational philosopher. There are mystical texts, a lot of them. The Zohar, the Arizal. The Arizal was our biggest Kabbalist, one of our biggest Kabbalists. He wrote a whole book on reincarnations called Shara Gilgulim. I have that book. It's in English. It got translated to English. It's a very heavy book. It discusses how you can be reincarnated to all kinds of things, to a plant, to an animal. You can be reincarnated. A lot of souls are recycled. And so it's like in mystical texts, it's widely accepted. The Ramban here on source 4, it says it's a great secret. The whole story of Yibum, where a brother dies and his brother has to marry without children. His brother has to marry the wife of his deceased brother. Some people say, and then they have a child. Some people say the name of the brother is raised up through that child. The brother's reincarnated in the child of that new marriage. And so that's the secret that Ramban's talking about here. The Zohar says that we're all one soul. The Zohar is the central Kabbalistic text. We're all one soul that's clothed in multiple generations. The Father, the Son, the third and the fourth generation are all one soul, which has not been rectified and has not even tried to rectify itself. So the Arizal takes it a step further. He says that you can be reincarnated in an inanimate object, in a plant, in an animal, or in a human. Okay. Now, what's the point of being reincarnated in a rock? I don't know. If you knew that you're reincarnated in a rock, that would kind of suck. That would be like a bad punishment, I think. Like, oh man, I'm in a rock. But I heard also, he says in his text, he says if you want to elevate, there's all kinds of ways to elevate those lower levels too. Like if an animal or you eat a fruit and you bless it, you can elevate it to a higher level. So, but here's just something interesting. So let's say this text 7, for those who believe in it, they say that, so they ask the question, if we do believe that there's Gehenna, hell, and that can elevate you to a higher level, then what's the place of reincarnation? Why do you need reincarnations at all? So he says like this: why is reincarnation necessary for the soul since it gets purified in Gehenna anyway? I like the language here. It's like, it gets purified in Gehenna. Like, that makes it sound much less scary. My teacher explained that there are 2 reasons for reincarnation. Because a person may be lacking in observance of certain commandments which are needed for perfection, Gehenna can only purify, but not add that which is lacking. So somebody might have been lax in giving tzedakah in their previous life. So they reincarnated in this world just to do that tzedakah, that mitzvah. When they do it, they've completed their rectification. And the next part, 2, reincarnation can correct and purify things that Gehenom cannot purify. There's certain things you can't correct in Gehenom, in hell. Gehenom's hell. This is because not all things can be purified in Gehenom, in hell. Therefore, a person must return to the world to fulfill his mission of perfection. So I share this in Mincha Mariv, on a Shabbat class in Shul. But interestingly enough, after all this, I'm saying you can believe in it, you can't believe in it. When I was, in my family, when I was born that same night, my grandmother had a dream, and her father came to her and told her that he's about to come to the world. And then that morning I was born, and my father called my grandmom, and my grandmom said, and he said, we just gave birth to a boy. And immediately she said, you should name him Eliyahu. And that's my name. So you can believe in that. You can believe that story you can believe dreams are not real or they are. I believe in that. Like I believe there's something happened there. Because my grandmother was a very, very holy person. She finished the whole book of Tehillim every Shabbos, and she was very connected to Hashem. So I believe she received some sort of like message from her father, and perhaps I'm connected to him in some way. Am I a reincarnation of him? I don't know, but perhaps I'm connected to him in some sort of spiritual way. So there's a message there. I'll just end with just you can take a look at these pros and cons. I'll just mention them really quickly. Pros of believing in reincarnation. It provides purpose in this world. If your purpose is to fix something that you didn't fix in the next world, this can keep you focused on your purpose. It explains suffering, like we mentioned, and it may explain weird coincidences or unique talents. Somebody might have a unique talent. They might speak another language they didn't even learn. Perhaps it's because from a previous life. Cons are that there's no clear proof for its existence. You could say that there is proof, but perhaps there isn't. And in Jewish text, there's not consensus around this. So we basically got through the afterlife. We got through reincarnation to some extent in this short period of time. But I think the main focus is in Judaism. Why texts don't talk about heaven and hell, reincarnation? Judaism's main focus, to be honest, and to be like candid, is Judaism's main focus is on this world, correcting ourselves in this world and making this world a better place. When we do that, we can elevate ourselves to higher spiritual levels and maybe transform this world into the next world. And that's kind of like our main focus. But it's important to not forget that there is another purpose to this world, which is our rectification of our own souls. And I think we'd be smart to focus on those things and to try to live an authentically spiritual life, be in touch with our inner spiritual core. And if we do that, we can be sure that we'll be kind of promising ourselves some of the good things that we saw on the source sheet. Check off, everyone. Let's unmute everybody.
Thank you.
All right.